Check out FlipsideGaming.com for all your gaming needs. Use the promo code HEROES to save 10% on all orders over $10 and support the channel at the same time. Hey there, this is John from Heroes and Legends, and welcome to the fourth day of official Dominaria previews. A lot of cards to look at again today, so I want to get started pretty quickly. Just a fast reminder though, if you are looking for a way to support what we do here at the channel, just check out the description below. You'll find a few ways to do that, one of which is our Patreon page. You're also going to find a product link to products on Amazon. If you make any purchases on Amazon, once you go through that initial link, no matter what it is, we'll get a small percentage for the channel. And finally, Flipside Gaming still offering the promo code for our viewers. Hopefully you can save some cash as well as support what we do here. Again, thank you to everyone who supports the channel, not just through those links, but all the viewers. You all make this channel what it is and helped with the growth over this last year. I appreciate you all. So with that being said, let's get into it with Daring Archaeologist. This came to us from a French language preview. It's a white and 3 creature, human artificer, 3/3. When Daring Archaeologist enters the battlefield, you may return target artifact card from your graveyard to your hands. When you cast a historic spell, put a +1/+1 counter on Daring Archaeologist. And of course, as a reminder, artifacts, legendaries, and sagas are all historic. So this card's fine. Like, this is more of a limited card than anything. The reason I'm not playing something like this in standard, even if I have a lot of historic cards, maybe a lot of artifacts, other legendary creatures, whatever it is, the problem is it's a 3/3 for 4 at its heart. And that's just not good enough. It's too slow. It doesn't have evasion. Even if I can grow this as the game goes on, it can be eliminated relatively easily, and I might not be able to get my damage across due to chump blocks or something like that. It's just not strong enough or fast enough, unfortunately. Limited, it can be fine for you. I don't think historic spells are going to be really difficult to get a hold of in this format, even in sealed, because there is going to be a legendary spot in each pack, so you know you're going to have at least 6 legendaries. Not to mention any artifacts. It feels like there's a fair amount of artifacts in the set. And throw sagas in the mix too, and you should be fine. Draft, it gets maybe even better. If you have enough targets, I think this is okay for you, because it doesn't feel as slow in the limited environment, where a forecasting costs 3/3. Even if it never grows, it's kind of par for the course, like right on curve. Not amazing, but not bad. And if you can get a few counters on it, all of a sudden this thing gets a lot better. So if you have the ability to put counters on it, most of the time I think you will. I think this is very playable. If you don't for some reason in your particular build, then maybe you skip it for something else at the 4 spot, but even so, it might still make your cut, honestly. Every once in a while, that first ability will let you recur an impactful artifact too. Alysha Honor card. This comes from the Magic Arena client, which is why it looks the way it does. A white and 1 human knight common 2/2. It will get +1/+0 for each legendary creature you control. So this is basically a limited card, but it's a pretty good one. A 2/2 for 2 with upside. Sign me up. Always happy to play these in draft and sealed. This has a couple high points for me, one of which it has the increased offense some of the time if I have some legendary creatures. So that increases the odds that this could trade up from time to time, which is awesome. And secondly, it's a knight, so especially if I'm drafting black-white, there are some knight synergies there. Even in sealed, you should find some synergies with knights here and there. So taking all that into account, I'd go as far as to say this is a good middle of the pack or even late pack pickup. It's going to bring some value to your deck and to your curve. Mesa Unicorn. This is going to cost a white and 1. It's a unicorn common 2/2 with lifelink. Another very simple limited card here. We saw a vampire with these stats not too long ago. And even though this doesn't benefit from tribal, it's a unicorn. Unfortunately, it's not a horse, which some people were hoping for. It's still a decent card that you can pick up, maybe again, middle of the pack, later in the pack and draft. You'll be happy to play it in sealed too. The 2/2 for 2 can attack in maybe on turn 3 with a 4-point life swing with that lifelink. That certainly does not feel bad. So again, a real good curve filler for your limited games. Rue Mijar, Master Wizard. This one's a mythic. 2 blue and 2 legendary creature, human wizard, 3/3 with flash. When this enters the battlefield, copy target instant or sorcery spell you control. You may choose new targets for the copy. Other wizards you control get +1/+1. Let's talk about limited first. It's an okay card. I mean, a lot of times you may have better things in your 4 spot, depending on what other synergies are in your deck. A 3/3 for 4 with flash, that's not bad. The first ability, I don't know if that's going to be relevant all that often in limited, because first off, you might not have that many instants or sorceries to begin with. Secondly, you'll have to have enough mana to cast the instant or sorcery along with this, and that starts to get a little bit expensive. Now, the second ability, other wizards you control get +1/+1. In limited, that's probably more realistic. If you drafted some other wizards in a draft and maybe went into that archetype, or even just had a few in your seal pool for some synergies, you could flash this in combat, maybe surprise your opponent with it, and that could be worth its while right there. Now, if you don't have at least a few wizards to be compatible with this, I would say I'm probably going to find something better at the 4th spot usually. This set is very powerful, and I don't feel like you're going to have to look very far to find creatures that are maybe even more effective than this one, honestly. Standard, don't really see it getting there. Again, I always like flash creatures in blue for standard control. That's always good, but I don't think they necessarily need this. And again, even though you may have access to some cheaper instants and sorceries there, at the same time, it's still asking a big mana commitment to do this, which is a little bit awkward. And if you knew maybe a control deck could play at the end of the turn a draw spell with this and copy the draw spell, something along those lines, that could be good. But for this much mana, I don't really see them pushing that. I think they're going to try to keep their deck a little more streamlined. Now, Commander Wizard decks, yeah, they might like something like this. Again, now you're in the market for maybe the cheaper spells like Lightning Bolt and stuff, or other things that you could be able to use that are maybe 1 or 2 casting costs. Also, you have access to bigger mana, so it may have a more impactful role if you're in a format like Commander. And also, too, with other wizards, that +1/+1 could become even more relevant. Next card comes to us from a Japanese language preview. Now, this was part of the big accidental reveal a few weeks ago. We talked about it in one of those videos. On your left, you see the English translation in the Scryfall mockup version that we used then. And this is Precognition Fields. It costs a blue and 3, enchantment rare. You may look at the top card of your library. You may cast the top card of your library if it's an instant or sorcery card. Pay 3, exile the top card of your library. Yikes, this card is not for me. Okay, enchantments that enter the battlefield and do absolutely nothing, especially if they cost 4 or more. I am not on board typically with these type of cards. Even if I have a lot of instants and sorceries in my deck, this still doesn't feel great to me. Every once in a while I could find advantage there. I mean, it's almost like being able to draw an extra card whenever you do hit one of those cards. However, at the same time, it's costing you 4, and if you don't hit one of those cards, it's sitting there doing nothing. Yes, you can dig for 1, but that's going to cost you 3 mana every time you do it. I don't know. This just does not feel very strong. Now, there are certain circumstances where it's probably better than others, right? We'll talk Commander. I mean, you could have a highly instant sorcery-centric Commander deck, and if that's the case, this might not be the worst thing in the world for you by any means. It could be fine there. Limited, I don't see this doing a whole lot, because again, most of the time, your limited decks are going to be pretty creature-centric, typically. You could draft maybe a high instant sorcery count, is it deck or something like that, perhaps? But even if you do, you still have the issue that this costs 4 to put out there, and it isn't always giving you advantage. It might some of the time, but not always, and it just feels super awkward to me. And Standard, no, I just don't see it happening. Again, even if there was a control deck or something like that, I just feel like there's better ways for them to move through their deck than this. This is just too clunky for me. And I look at this and I think, well, maybe this could be fun with, say, Miracles or something, but this is definitely too slow for any format that's playing Miracles, except maybe Commander, of course. So, yeah, it kind of is what it is, I suppose, and this is one that's not a card I see myself playing anytime soon. Syncopate. Alright, this one's a reprint. It's a blue X instant common counter target spell unless its controller pays X. If that spell is countered this way, exile it instead of putting it into its owner's graveyard. So we saw this from Odyssey as well as Return to Ravnica. It saw standard play back in those days. It will again. It's a very good control card. It's nice because not only is it flexible based on how much mana you have and the fact that control decks tend to be rather mana heavy anyway, but it also exiles cards, which does prevent some graveyard shenanigans. And there's definitely some graveyard shenanigans you have to worry about sometimes in this current format of standard, and I'm sure no doubt in the next standard meta. So I do like that a lot. And in limited, yeah, good counterspell for you there too. It's going to help you control the game a little bit. It works well in lieu of a removal spell if you don't have enough removal. Overall, just a fantastic reprint. Unwind. This one's interesting. A blue and 2 instant common counter target non-creature spell, untap up to 3 lands. Basically like a negate, but it costs 1 more, although you get to untap 3 lands when you play it. So I'm a little conflicted on this one. I have to ask myself in standard, would I rather play this over the reliable 2 casting cost negates? I don't know if I'd want to. I at least want to try it though and see what it's like, because the negate's great because it only costs 2. Very streamlined. This card's going to cost you 3. That's a little more. However, there is an advantage to untapping lands, and maybe you can follow up with another counterspell, or perhaps a draw spell at end of turn, and that's not bad either. So, like Negate, this is a sideboard card most of the time, probably. So I'd like to test maybe instead of 3 or 4 Negates, peeling 1 or 2 of those out and just trying a couple of these and just see how it works. Maybe it'll be good, maybe it won't be as great as I'm thinking. The other thing you have to think about with this one too is it's not just basic lands. You can untap any lands, so those could be on-basic lands that have good abilities. I mean, we have the legendary transform lands in Ixalan. A lot of those are real good, so you might be able to find advantages there. So there might be some out-of-the-box things you could do with this, no doubt. So, I don't know. We'll see how it performs in Standard. Other formats like Modern or the Eternal formats, I do think it starts to get outpriced a little bit. And even though maybe Storm decks would like the fact that it untaps lands, but I don't know if Storm decks need this. I think they have more streamlined ways of doing it currently, where this isn't going to be all that great for them. So I do feel like this is probably more of a maybe standard card, definitely limited card, something you might want to play around with in some commander builds that are trying to hold up a lot of mana or be extra controlling and grindy, which I know all the players love to play against. So maybe it's for those cases. But this is a pretty cool design. I like to see stuff like this. Drudge Sentinel. This is a black and 2 skeleton warrior. It's a common 2/1/3. Tap Drudge Sentinel. It gains indestructible till end of turn. Basically the new form of regeneration is what this is. A little bit of a throwback to Drudge Skeleton. So, is this good? It's okay in limited. Here's the downsides. A 2/1 for 3 doesn't feel real good. The regeneration, quote-unquote, ability costs 3. That's a little expensive. But you don't want to underestimate having a resilient blocker that can deal with a big ground pounder repeatedly. And this card will do it for you. So if your opponent's playing a lot of big dumb green creatures, if you didn't main deck it, sideboard it in, or sideboard a second one maybe. But in my main deck, I might go with 1, but I don't think I want to go with more than 1, at least initially. It's a nice way to protect yourself. It's a little bit defensive. Maybe early on it can put across a little damage, but for the most part, this will be a defensive card. And it is a skeleton warrior, not a knight, even though it kind of looks like a knight in the picture. That was a little disappointing to me. I feel like if it could have worked with knight synergies, this card would have been a lot better. But since it's not, it's one of those cards that maybe makes your cut here and there. Not all the time, perhaps, but again, it's definitely going to fill a defensive role when you need it. Lingering Phantom. This costs a black and 5. It's a spirit, uncommon, 5/4. Whenever you cast a historic spell, you may pay a black. If you do, return Lingering Phantom from your graveyard to your hand. Now, this is fine for limited. Like, 5/4 for 6 isn't amazing, and you might have better 6 drops, but that ability makes me feel a little better because, like I said earlier, I just don't feel like getting historic spells is going to be all that difficult, even in sealed. So if I can recur this a couple times, that can get kind of annoying. Now, again, if I don't feel like that's going to happen consistently in my deck, then maybe I have a better 6-drop, or sometimes maybe I still have a better 6-drop because there's some really good 6-drops in here. And again, this being a higher end of the curve card, a lot of times will be cut if you just have better things higher end. And like I said, you might. So it sees play probably a percentage of the time, but not all the time in your limited builds. But I think it's just fine. I think it's a decent card. Do keep in mind, it is a spirit that doesn't fly, though. But having a 5/4 power toughness that could potentially come back, even if it's just once or twice during the course of the game, that can be annoying for your opponent to deal with, no doubt. The Eldest Reborn. This is a black and 4. It's an enchantment saga uncommon. Number 1. Each opponent sacrifices a creature or planeswalker. Number 2, each opponent discards a card. Number 3, put target creature or planeswalker card from a graveyard onto the battlefield under your control. First, I have to say, look at that Bolas art. All these sagas, their art has been incredible. I really like this one, though. Where do you play this card? Limited? Yeah, absolutely, I'll play it. Maybe not first pick in a pack, but a little bit later in the pack, middle-ish of the pack, perhaps. You might be able to grab one of these. I feel like this actually is a pretty nice payout for 5, even though you have to really anticipate all 3 of those things are going to happen to feel great about the fact that this costs 5. But hopefully that will be the case more often than not. Number 1, each opponent sacrificing a creature or planeswalker. Keeping in mind they're going to make that decision based on the fact that 3 is coming, but that's okay. I mean, they're going to make all their decisions based on the fact that number 3 is coming. But still, sometimes those edict effects are a little bit better if you can play them early before your opponent has a lot more options. So on turn 5 or turn 6, it might be a little underwhelming from time to time, but it still could be a good gotcha moment at other times. The 2, again, same thing. Later on, having them choose a card and discard might not be as impactful as early on, but at the same time, maybe they're holding on to something like a big bomb that they just can't cast yet, and you are able to kind of circumvent dealing with it by having them discard it. And then number 3, that's really where the meat of this card is. You want to reanimate something, hopefully something good. And, in Games Unlimited, that could be a little high variance as to what's actually available, but hopefully there'll be something at least decent for you to reanimate. Then you'll definitely be getting your money's worth for this card. Granted, if sagas are good enough and artifacts are good enough, you may find people even main decking naturalized type effects in this limited environment. So sometimes more expensive sagas could be a risk, but again, we'll have to kind of see the whole set and kind of see how it plays before we get to that point. If not, they may side it in game 2 or something, and if that's the case, fine, whatever. Now for standard, a little too slow there, unfortunately. I mean, for 5 mana, that's a lot to ask, especially considering it's slowly unfolding. You might as well just throw a targeted removal spell in that spot in your deck instead and call it a day. Commander, that's where this card really shines. It impacts every opponent. They all have to sacrifice a creature or planeswalker. They all have to discard a card. Then you get to choose your reanimation target of creature or planeswalker from any of the graveyards. And you might have some pretty stocked graveyards in Commander games, right? Again, it's got to survive to get there, but I think it's worth trying because it could be a huge play for just 5 mana. So this card seems super sweet, just aesthetically, as well as some of the gameplay potential. Again, especially in those multiplayer games. Orgoros, the Empty One. 2 black and 4, legendary creature specter, uncommon 4/3 flying. When this deals combat damage to a player, that player discards a card at random. If that player can't, you draw a card. So this is like a buffed up Hypnotic Spectre. So fans of that card from the old days, you're going to appreciate this a little bit. Now this costs a lot more, and part of the appeal of Hypnotic Spectre was the fact that it could do this early and really start to destroy your opponent's hand because of the random discard. That is a big deal. There's a big difference between random discard and your opponent gets to choose what they discard. This can really hit the wrong card and give your opponent some headaches. Now this card costing 6 isn't going to be as devastating in that department because your opponent may have played a lot of the cards, but if they're holding on to anything or have a big play that they can't cast yet when this comes out, yeah, it could mess with them, and that's pretty cool. And if they do run out of cards, then you're getting card advantage eventually, and that's kind of awesome too. Also, 4/3 flyer for 6, that's decent in limited, just generally. The 3 can be a little fragile. Sure, it will die to like the flash 3/3 flyer we saw the other day, for example, or a number of removal spells, of course, or direct damage, but I think it's still worth it for 6 mana because if it can get by and do damage, you're going to start really pulling ahead in this game. And if your opponent can't block this thing, you might be pulling ahead anyway, regardless of the ability. What's awkward is your opponent has a strange decision to make. A lot of times when this type of creature's on the battlefield, your opponent just can't hold on to their cards and they just have to play them out. But this time they have to think, you know what, if I play this card out and it's not that great for me right now, then I'm giving my opponent the card draw when this thing hits me. So should I just hang on to this and discard it instead? So it really slows down their game, makes them make some hard decisions. Good limited card. I think it's a little too expensive, unfortunately, for the world of Standard, but it is a cool card. I love the flavor behind it and the nostalgic feeling when you think back to Hypnotic Spectre back in the old days. Fire Elemental, 5/4, 2 red and 3, Elemental, common. This one is a reprint. We've actually seen this reprinted a number of times, but it originally came from Alpha Beta Unlimited, so very nostalgic inclusion here. Also love the flavor text, by the way. So, do you actually play this card nowadays? Unfortunately, Fire Elemental has not aged well. It's not unplayable in Limited, especially Sealed, because it is a nice sized creature for 5, a 5/4. But in this set, it feels a little outclassed. There's a lot of powerful things, especially once you start getting to the 4, 5, 6 spots, that I think a lot of the time this doesn't make your cut, but it is there if you need it. Get to Journey Mage, another card from the Magic Arena client, a red and 2, human wizard, common 3/2. When this enters the battlefield, if you control another wizard, this will deal 2 damage to each opponent. So that's cool for multiplayer games. The card itself, not super impressive, though. I mean, if you have another wizard in play, then okay, it hits an opponent for 2. That's alright, but nothing really special. And a lot of times this will trade down. We'll talk more about 3/2 creatures for 3 in a little bit here, because there's another card that I think is a good example of that. But they tend to be alright. I don't always run them if I have better things, but if I don't, it's a serviceable limited card. Now, if you have some wizard synergies, maybe you're able to draft some synergies, or else you just happen to have some in your sealed pool, perhaps this card does get a little bit better. Goblin Chain Whirler, 3 red, Goblin Warrior, rare, 3/3, first strike. When this enters the battlefield, it deals 1 damage to each opponent and each creature and planeswalker they control. You don't want to play this with a lot of enraged creatures on the opposite side of the battlefield. I'll say that first off because it is not a May ability. Other than that, though, this is a really good card, I think. We'll talk about limited first. Yeah, it's strong. As long as you're comfortable with the 3 red, because if you're, say, splashing red, then maybe you skip this one. But if you're confident that 3 red is not going to be an issue for you, even if it's not a turn 3 play, this is still like really good. 3/3 first striker, and that 1 damage could deal with some of their early drops and such, or maybe token generation. I know there's going to be like Saproling tokens, and we saw some other white token generation too. So perhaps this is a good card against some of those strategies, especially early on. But even regardless, it's just a really good creature that puts a lot of pressure on your opponent quickly, and that's always a good thing. So again, if you're comfortable with the casting cost, go for it. Standard, I think this could see some standard play. The problem right now with red and standard is there's so many good red cards. I mean, look at the mono red aggro deck or any variant of those aggro decks that we've seen. All of them run red. There's a reason for that because red is really solid right now. So taking a new card and breaking into some of those decks isn't always going to be easy. I do think this one could do it though. I do think aggro-wise, this will see some standard play going forward, especially post-rotation. We'll probably see even more play. Also, that enters the battlefield effect could be good in standard too against the right matchups, making it maybe even a sideboard option. And beyond that, even in like modern or legacy, I could see myself thinking about throwing this into a goblin deck. Legacy especially because you have the Young Pyromancer decks out there. This would be good against them. So who knows, maybe eventually, if not with this set, Goblin Tribal could be even a thing in standard. That would be sweet. Good card too if you're a Goblin fan for Commander or casual formats, or maybe for a theme in your cube. So yeah, real strong card here for 3 mana. I like the whole cycle we've seen so far of the 3 on color cards. They're actually all pretty sweet. Next we have Varric's Bladewing alongside the token that goes with the card, Carrick's Bladewing. And this costs 2 red and 2. It's a legendary creature dragon. This one's a mythic. Kicker 3, 4/4, flying. When this enters the battlefield, if it was kicked, create the token you see on your right side. Okay, this is awesome and limited. I'm going to start there. It's a mythic. You won't see it a lot, but if you open this in a pack, pick this thing up because it's going to be a powerhouse for you. Look at it this way. On turn 4, a 4/4 flyer is really good and limited. If you play this a little bit later and you can afford the kicker, it's actually not that bad. I mean, 2 red and 5, so 7 altogether for 8/8 power toughness in the air in 2 different bodies, so your opponent has to deal with both of them. Yeah, that is actually kind of awesome. So this is a mythic probably more so because of the limited game than anything else. This will be fantastic there. Now this card is a little reminiscent of Broodmage Dragon back in the day. The casting cost there was Junk colors and 3, so converted mana cost was 1 less, but it was 3 different colors, which made it kind of hard sometimes to cast. But it didn't have the option of casting without the token like this card does. That actually saw standard play in its day. However, this is a different environment. I said a few moments ago that it's hard for red cards to break in because the red cards are so solid right now. Maybe it sees a little bit of play here and there. Maybe again post-rotation, perhaps it sees a little more, I don't know. But I do think this is going to have some trouble hanging in the standard format with all the competition out there. But generally, I mean, this is an interesting design, and I really like this for your limited games, no doubt. This could also fit in well to a Dragon Commander deck, just as a good, solid mid-range card that gives you a little bit of early board presence, too. Adventurous Impulse. This is a green, it's a sorcery common. Look at the top 3 cards of your library. You may reveal a creature or land card from among them and put it into your hand. Put the rest on the bottom of your library in any order. So it looks like green more and more is getting these dig cards, which I'm cool with. I kind of dig it. Yeah, see what I did there? And this one, it is a sorcery, sure, but it also only costs 1, so I'm fine with that. And this is reminiscent of some of the commune type spells. Doesn't dig as deep, but it gives you a lot of flexibility considering it's land or creature, and that's kind of awesome. It's not basic land either, that's worth noting. So there's a lot of options here that you could hit, even though you aren't digging as deep. So do you play this card? Yeah, I think this is fantastic. Limited, I'd play it because early on you want to hit your land drops, and perhaps you're going a little deeper with colors or you're splashing. It helps you at least have a chance at seeing one of those colors quicker. And also, later in the game, when you need to dig past your lands and get to your creatures and get your heat, it helps you do that too. So I really like this. And in draft, you might be able to pick this up middle to even later portion of the pack, especially considering you'll want to be relatively solid in green to play this to begin with. And other than that, people are a lot of times competing for a lot of the creatures, and sometimes they let things like this slide by for a bit. But this is still a great pickup, I think. Standard, yeah, see standard play. We might see Mono Green Stompy or Gruul Stompy or something like that evolve, or even the Monsters deck just kind of evolve. So I think this could be a part of those decks to accelerate them and speed them up a little bit. And I think that's actually kind of awesome. I mean, again, imagine a Stompy deck if you're getting a little mana flooded and you can't hit a big creature. This might help expedite that situation. So it could work there. Modern, I don't know if it sees play there just because there are a lot of stronger options for this type of thing. So overall, really awesome card design here. I like seeing stuff like this in green, and it looks like it's going to continue going forward maybe. Alright, this next one is a card that came to us from a Spanish language preview. It's Elena Envoi. It costs a green and 2. It's an Elf Scout 3/2. Green and 1. Add a mana of any color. So here's the thing with a card like this. Magic players love value. I love value. This card isn't showing a lot of value. You have to pay 2 mana to get 1. You have to pay 3 to get a 3/2, which will trade down with a lot of 2 drops, a lot of 2/2s or 2/1s. This is the opposite of value. And I look at this card and I get physically ill. I'm physically ill right now. I don't even know if I can finish this video. So here's the thing with the card. Is there a role for it? There sure is. In limited games, if you need to color fix desperately, this is going to be a way to color fix. Maybe sealed more than draft, perhaps, where draft you may have more options available to you. But you know what? If you're splashing a third color and you don't have a real good way to pick up that color other than a basic land, then yeah, you might end up playing this. If you're getting really greedy with colors, yeah, you might end up playing this. If you just need a 3-drop, a 3/2 isn't the worst thing in the world. Like I said, it does trade down some of the time, but it also is still better than a 2/3 probably. At least it's a little more aggressive. But you might have better 3-drops a lot of the time too, and you might skip this. So it will see occasional play, but a lot of the times you'll probably just have something better. But it does have its role, if nothing else. Thorn Elemental, another reprint, 2 green and 5 Elemental. Uncommon 7/7, you may have this assign its combat damage as though it weren't blocked. We've seen this card a number of times in the past, and it's a good limited card. I think it's a little too expensive for standard, even though it is powerful. I do think it's a little slow with that casting cost, even if you do ramp into this a little bit. I feel like there's just better options right now, especially with some of the options this set is bringing. But in limited, I feel like this is a pretty good draft pick, perhaps a higher, maybe even first pick in some packs. Because that 7/7, once it hits the battlefield, if your opponent doesn't have an answer for it, they're going to be taking some damage. Because even if they block it, they can't chump block effectively, because you can still force the damage across to them. And 7 is a lot of damage. So I like the power toughness here and the ability for the casting cost, definitely for draft and sealed. Grand Warlord Raha. This is going to cost a green, a red, and 2. It's a legendary creature, Alpha Warrior, rare, 3/4 with haste. Whenever one or more creatures you control attack, add that much mana in any combination of red and or green. Until end of turn, you don't lose this mana as steps and phases end. Okay, so this is actually pretty decent. In limited first, yeah, this is a fine pickup. Maybe not pack 1, pick 1, because it is a dual color card. I like to see what's coming at me first before I commit to something like that. But definitely pack 2 or pack 3, I could see myself first picking this a lot of the time if I'm comfortable with the colors at that point. So it's going to do a lot for you there, let you ramp into some things. I'm going to make a real bad comparison now, though. I look at this card, and I kind of think Bloodbraid Elf. I know, it's not as good as Bloodbraid Elf. Don't get it twisted. But what I'm thinking is, for casting costs, I mean, it's the same casting cost as Bloodbraid. It has haste, decent-sized creature, and beyond that, it doesn't have Cascade, but it's giving you mana, perhaps, that might let you cast something a little bit quicker than you would normally be able to, and give you more board presence. It has some similarities, and because of that, even though this is legendary, it's another big drawback when it comes to constructed magic, I do think this could see some play in standard. Like, this feels like it kind of wants to be like in an elf deck or something like that, like more small creatures as opposed to ramping into large things, because this could give you maybe a few small plays in one turn, and you're attacking in with the smaller things to get extra mana when you need to. or maybe just some good mid-range plays could come from this. So yeah, ultimately, I do think it does see at least some standard play. I mean, the green Stompy deck, maybe it uses something like this and goes more Gruul colors, because you have to think, we haven't seen the whole set yet, by the way, so I don't want to get too ahead of myself, but I feel like that green Stompy deck is probably going to run at least a little bit of red, because red has so many good tools that it would be hard to sit there and say, I'm going to commit to completely green right now in the standard environment. Just from what we've seen in the past, I feel like the red is just so enticing right now. So maybe it's more of a Gruul Stompy deck, or this could maybe slide into some of the Monsters decks. I at least want to test it there, if nothing else. So regardless, though, I do think it sees standard play. I don't know about, unfortunately, Modern, because Bloodbraid exists and cards like that. So there is a lot of competition for this type of 4-drop in a format like that. This could be good in Commander, though. Definitely some Commander decks would like to have this, especially if they're running a lot of small creatures, trying to ramp into maybe some crazy things. Damping Sphere. This is crazy. It costs 2. Artifact. Uncommon. If a land is tapped for 2 or more mana, it produces 1 colorless instead of any other type and amount. Each spell a player casts costs 1 more to cast for each other spell that player has cast this turn. Okay, let me tell you a little story about this card. A few weeks back, the accidental reveal happened. This was one of the cards. I think there's, 150 cards or so in that reveal. This one stood out the most to me because it has immediate implications for Modern, Legacy, Vintage, and even Commander. This hoses Tron decks. This hoses Storm decks. This is pretty crazy as a sideboard card, right? It only costs 2. It's an artifact. It can fit into any deck. It doesn't have to worry about color requirements. This is something else that I didn't really see coming, quite honestly. This is going to have a major, major impact on a lot of different types of constructed Magic right away, right out of the gate. Something else to note about this card, it is uncommon and not rare. We didn't know the rarity when we saw the big reveal before. So a lot of people assumed it would be rare. As a matter of fact, pre-order price for this card was around $10. We now know this is uncommon. Now think of this though. I know this isn't a finance video, but I'm getting kind of financy here because I think it's kind of interesting. Uncommons aren't as easy to grab as sometimes you assume they will be. If you buy a booster box, you'll probably get 1 to 3 copies of this. The demand for this card is going to be extremely heavy. The Modern players, the Legacy players, the Vintage players, Commander players even, they want copies and they want them quick, especially if they're playing in tournaments anytime soon. They're going to want to play a set of these. And with all that demand out there, I think this becomes a pretty expensive uncommon. I could see this settling in, once packs start to get cracked and the product's flowing, maybe $5 to $7 in the short term. I just think there's going to be that much demand on it. The good news is I don't think there'll be a ton of standard demand. Of course, we haven't seen the whole set yet. Who knows? But I do like that they printed this card because I do want to see answers in standard before we see problems. I don't want to see a card just take over the format and get banned. I'd rather have cards like this exist, so if anything's going to happen, there's already kind of a stopgap in place. I think that's way better design and better for the standard format. So even if we don't use this today, I'm glad it's here. But again, the real story is beyond standard with this card. So pretty crazy, and this is going to lead to some big changes in a lot of formats, I think, going forward. Now, it doesn't mean your Tron deck or your Storm deck you need to throw in the trash or anything like that, because the meta will evolve. You'll find answers to respond to this, and again, you still could have a good game one regardless, where you don't have to worry about this, but it is going to have an impact. Gilded Lotus. Alright, here's a reprint for you. It costs 5. It's an artifact, rare, tap, add 3 mana of any one color. This was Magic Mike's preview card last night, and this is a huge reprint. Originally from Mirrodin, it got a reprinting also in Magic 2013, as well as from the Vault 20. And this is just a super sweet inclusion. About $13 card, actually, so not bad financially either to pick up in a new set if you happen to open one. Now, this did see standard play back in its day. I think it could see a little standard play now. Back in the old days, it usually showed up in combo or control decks. Today's standard, I don't know if we're going to get a combo deck necessarily, although, again, we have a lot more to see. But control might run this. I wouldn't be shocked if some control decks ran a copy of this just to bank more mana for their counter magic and such. So you might see it show up at least in small quantities here and there. Limited, this thing could be crazy for you. You're paying for it. It's 5 to get it on the battlefield, but it immediately starts paying for itself really fast and making up that tempo because you can automatically tap it for a 3 mana of any color. So it fixes color, which is nice. It also ramps you out. if you have big things to ramp into, and that's actually pretty intriguing. That's the other thing too in Standard I didn't mention. In this particular Standard, creatures are better than they used to be. This might be a accessory for ramp. So I don't know. We'll have to kind of see. Ramp is hard though to work out in Standard because it does take the perfect combinations of cards available to you. And Standard has a limited size of a pool. When it happens and it works, it can be amazing. We've seen some incredible ramp decks in Standard in the past. But usually they have a hard time getting the formula just right. So we'll have to kind of wait and see there. But it's a possibility. Also, too, this card has the high price tag because of Commander. So this is an awesome reprint for Commander players or Cube players. If you've ever played MTGO Cubes, this is almost always in there. So there's a reason for that. It's really good in Cubes. So fantastic reprint here. Great choice. And of course, what? You had to have a Lotus in Dominaria, right? We had a Mox. You had to have a Lotus. Another reprint that originated from Alpha Beta Unlimited, although it has been reprinted a number of times since then, it is Juggernaut. It costs 4, artifact creature Juggernaut, uncommon 5/3. It attacks each combat of Fable, can't be blocked by walls. Another card that feels outclassed when you're talking about Standard in this day and age, but another decent pickup for Limited, honestly. I'm not saying it's a first pick, second pick, third pick, always necessarily in a pack, but it is colorless, it keeps your options open. And it's a sizable creature. The drawback of having to attack each turn is definitely something you have to consider. But it only has 3 toughness, and there are times it will trade down. I never like that. But, it can push across a lot of damage. And it can't be blocked by walls. I mean, how important is that in today's Magic, right? Sorry. So, regardless, though, yeah, I'd play with one of these in my deck. It used to be a much more powerful card back in its time, but it's still fine for draft and sealed. Helm of the Host. This is another kind of crazy card. It costs 4, legendary artifact equipment rare. At the beginning of combat on your turn, create a token that's a copy of equipped creature, except the token isn't legendary if the equipped creature is legendary. That token gains haste. Equip cost is 5. So you're paying a little bit, 4 to cast, 5 to equip, but wow, the possibilities here are pretty crazy. I mean, traditionally, copying creatures never circumvented the legendary rule on its own because you can do some really crazy things. And there's tons of really crazy things you can do. I won't list them all in this video because I'd be here all day. But there's a lot of stuff you can do when you think about Commander or just casual play when you have a lot of cards open to you. Now, Standard, could it see Standard play? Maybe. I mean, one combo that just intrigues me a little bit is Combat Celebrant in that card because that can, of course, lead to a game win. Also, too, if you leave Standard, there's other amazing combos, like for Commander and such, like Godot, which also searches for the equipment, which is nice, or even Aurelia. There's just so many crazy things you can do with this card that just leads to you basically winning. So that is important, and you want to notice those type of combos, no doubt. Limited, do you play this in Draft and Sealed? Yeah, you certainly do. I said it was a little expensive, sure, to actually make happen, but you could put this on any creature. If it's a legendary, like really strong creature, wonderful. If it's just your average creature, I mean, just copying it over and over and over again is still really good, even if there's no trick attached to it. In Limited, that's going to be great for you. Sure, awkward if you draw this and you don't have any creatures in play, or there was just a board sweep or something like that happens. But for the most part, like, this is going to be just fine for you. I would even say this is a pretty high draft pick, if not first pickable in a lot of packs, because it doesn't commit you to color, and it has a potential really strong upside. All right, with that being said, those are the cards for today. So we're going to be back tomorrow, and we're going to recap everything that happens within the next 24 hours. But until then, hey, thanks for watching. Please remember to like, subscribe, and have a great day. Hey, thanks for watching. This video is made possible by the generous support of viewers like you on Patreon. Check out the description below for links to our Patreon page as well as our Amazon affiliate store, where a small percentage of all sales will also help support the channel. Finally, if you haven't had a chance yet to subscribe, hit that subscribe button so you don't miss any new videos on Heroes and Legends. Talk to you again soon, and have a great day.